Hello and welcome. Today, we're talking about making the right choice. But we're not getting lost in some dusty old philosophy textbook. Nope, we're looking at the real-world ethical challenges that pop up in our jobs, on our vacations, and even in the games we love to watch.
I know, that sounds completely backwards, right? But just stick with me here, because that is just one of these surprisingly tricky ethical corners we are going to explore today. So in this explainer, we're going to dive into 3 totally different case studies where you'll see the right answer is, well, it's anything but obvious. We're going to look at that blurry line between a personal social media post and a professional firing, the hidden cost of our adventures, and yeah, even the bizarre logic of losing on purpose. All right, here's a quick look at what we've got lined up. We'll kick things off with social media, then jump to the impact of tourism, and then tackle the strange world of losing in sports. Finally, we'll tie it all together. So let's get into it. Okay, our first case takes us right into that high-stakes world where, believe it or not, a few dozen characters on social media can absolutely cost you your career. So this was a real tweet. It was sent by a PR executive right before she got on an 11-hour flight to South Africa. And what happened while she was in the air? Well, it's pretty much a masterclass in how fast your life can completely unravel in the digital age. The speed of this is what's just mind-blowing. I mean, while she was totally disconnected from the world, 30,000 feet in the air, a global firestorm erupted online. By the time that plane touched down, she was the #1 trending topic worldwide, and yeah, her career with that company was already over. And look, this was not some isolated one-off event. This kind of thing happens all the time. You've got a childcare worker fired for posting she hates being around kids, a teacher let go for party photos her school didn't like. That line between our private lives and our public selves has honestly never been blurrier. And this really gets us to the heart of the debate, right? On one hand, you have the argument that your social media is your private space. What you say there, especially if it has nothing to do with your job, is your own business. But then, on the other hand, companies argue that their employees are always representatives, and their actions, even personal ones, can seriously damage the company's reputation. So where do you think the line is? Should it matter if the post was on the clock or off? If it was about work or something totally personal? This is the tricky dilemma that businesses, and really all of us, are trying to figure out every single day. Okay, let's switch gears. We're moving from the digital world to the physical one, where our actions leave a very different, but maybe even more complicated kind of footprint. Let's talk about the ethics of how we travel. 56,000. Just let that number sink in for a second. That's how many tourists visited Antarctica in just one season. A whole continent that used to be only for the most hardcore explorers is now a bucket list destination. But you have to ask, what's the real cost of that adventure? So here's the debate. On one side, the argument is that tourism creates environmental ambassadors. People see it, they fall in love with it, and then they want to protect it. Plus, it brings money to local towns. But the dangers, they are huge. This ecosystem is so fragile that just 20 footsteps can cause damage. And the carbon footprint to get there is massive, which ironically contributes to the very climate change that threatens the place you came to see. As the travel writer Costas Chris says, we could be just one oil spill away from completely destroying the place we're there to marvel at. It's this incredible paradox. The very act of admiring these fragile places puts them at the greatest risk. And this isn't just about Antarctica. It's about vulnerable places all over the globe. So it forces us to ask a really tough question, doesn't it? Is our own personal desire to see these incredible world wonders worth the potential harm we cause just by showing up? All right, and now for our final and maybe the most counterintuitive case study of them all, let's get into the ethics of deliberately trying to lose in professional sports. I know, it sounds crazy. The practice has a name. It's called tanking. It's basically when a team loses on purpose in the short term to get a big advantage in the long term. You might remember back in the 2012 Olympics, badminton teams were actually disqualified for trying to lose matches just to get an easier opponent in the next round. Now, the logic, as weird as it sounds, is actually pretty simple. You lose now, so you can get a better draft pick, for example. And that better draft pick gives you a much better chance of winning a championship a few years down the road. For some teams, it's a better bet than just being stuck in the middle of the pack forever. Tanking is what you'd call an open secret in sports. Pretty much everybody knows it happens, but nobody ever admits it. Well, almost nobody. One NBA owner who actually did admit publicly that he told his team to tank was fined this much for it: $600,000. And this is where it gets really interesting, because the values just completely collide. Is a manager's job to win every single game, or is it to build the absolute best team for long-term success, even if it means short-term pain? On the flip side, people argue it's a total betrayal of the fans paying good money to see a real competition. It just undermines the integrity of the game.
So what's your take? Is tanking just a clever, long-term strategy to build a championship team, or is it a flat-out violation of the spirit of sport?
Okay, so let's pull all this back and wrap it up. We've looked at 3 wildly different situations: a tweet, a trip, and a game. But what do they all have in common? Well, each and every one of these dilemmas really boils down to a fundamental conflict of values. For business, it's that constant tug of war between our personal freedom and our professional responsibility. For travel, it's our deep urge to explore clashing with the absolute need to preserve these places. And for sports, it's a calculated short-term strategy versus the core principle of fair play. And that, right there, is the key takeaway. There are no simple black and white answers here. What looks absolutely right from one point of view can look completely wrong from another. That's what makes them true dilemmas. So I'll leave you with this final thought. We have a right to speak our minds, a deep drive to explore our world, and in some cases, a duty to build a winning team. But when those powerful instincts collide with our shared sense of what's fair, what's right, and what's responsible, which one should win?